Hi, and welcome to the Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer-producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and host of this show. Carol is the president of From the Heart Productions, a nonprofit organization that has supported filmmakers with the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, education, and resources for over 30 years. Carol also teaches the Learn Producing class. Each class features an industry expert guest instructor and is designed to give the information, guidance, and support to become a successful producer. You can learn more about this class and all of From the Heart Productions offerings at FromTheHeartProductions.com.
Ever wonder who solves the countless problems that can derail a film production before they become disasters? Well, today's guest reveals how this happens.
Whether you're making your first documentary or producing your 10th feature, today's conversation will reveal the production management secrets that can save your project time, money, and unnecessary stress. So glad you could join us on the Art of Film Funding podcast. I'm Claire Papin, co-producer with Carol Dean. Today, we have a very special guest whose work has helped thousands of filmmakers understand the business and logistics behind successful film and television productions. Deborah Patz has spent decades working as a production manager, production coordinator, and production executive on award-winning productions for companies including Lucasfilms, IMAX, Universal, BBC, CBC, and Disney. Her book, Film Production Management 101, has become one of the industry's most respected resources and is often described as the essential roadmap to the business side of production. The newly updated third edition covers everything from budgeting and scheduling to respectful workplaces and sustainable production practices. Deborah's practical insights can save you years of trial and error. And now I'd like to welcome the founder of From the Heart Productions, Carol Dean, who will lead today's conversation.
Thank you, Claire. So, Deborah, welcome to the Art of Film Funding podcast. And congratulations on your third edition. Just that is incredible. Your book has become required reading for many filmmakers, and Claire and I are delighted to have this opportunity to discuss the lessons you've learned throughout your remarkable career. So let's start with what inspired you to write Film Production Management 101, and what gap did you see in the industry that needed to be filled?
Well, thank you, first of all, very much for the invitation. I am delighted to be here. Film Production Management 101, the first time I wrote the book was back in, or actually it was published in 1997. So that means I was writing it in 96. But in the mid-90s, I recognized there was no book on how to be a production coordinator. And I wanted to move on from coordination into management. So I wrote the book and got it published by MWP Productions, and that pushed it out around the world. Then a number of years later, by 2002, after I'd been production managing, it was clear that production managers needed to know what coordinators did. And also I had a lot of skills now as production management. So I wrote a production management book and we put the two of them together. And that's actually the birth of Film Production Management 101. That's why the book is so thick. It's like about 500 pages. And then I've been basically updating it, but I don't update it too often. This is only like the third edition, but the first one was we were still making movies on film and doing film finish. And then it moved over to digital. And now we have moved into definitely highlighting sustainable practices, and we have a heightened awareness about the need for the respectful workplace. So that's a lot of the focus of what this edition is.
Oh, that's really important to have that update. Good for you for putting that in. You described the book as serving both production managers and production coordinators. So can you explain how these roles differ and why is it important for filmmakers to understand both perspectives?
Yeah, well, the coordinator is basically the right hand of the production manager. The coordinator is so tapped into the logistics of production, they're probably the only person who knows everybody at the wrap party. They basically put into action whatever the production decisions are. The production manager, however, is actually making a lot of those production decisions. And they start with that back at the budget, in that they're allocating the production money to various categories to determine which crew is going to be hired, how big is the crew, what equipment can be rented, what locations can be used. Is it going to be studio shoot or a location shoot, union, not union? So it is a monetary perspective, but they're still making those decisions. And if you make a promise or a decision in prep or on set in any department, you're basically spending the production money. So that's why the production manager has that perspective. They have to know how to spend the budget, but also make sure that the project comes in on time and on budget while realizing the director's vision.
Okay, so then what's the line producer doing? Do you still have a line producer with the coordinator?
Yeah, you can. The larger the production, you have to start splitting out the job into more people. And a line producer is often a very experienced production manager who's moving into producing. And they can be a line producer who's also a PM on a project, or there can be a line producer and a separate PM, just like you could have a PM and an assistant PM, depending on what skills people are bringing to the project.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. One of the themes of the book is taking a project from prep through post-production. And you even covered the audit process, which is wonderful. So why do so many filmmakers underestimate the importance of planning for the end of the production while they're still at the beginning?
Wow, that's probably because there's so much to do to turn a script into a film. I mean, you don't really learn how to prep for an audit in a film class. It's next to impossible to teach anybody how to manage a production budget in a film class because the equipment is usually part of the program, so it's basically free. The cast and crew are volunteers, so they're basically free. So how are you tracking that money? That leaves learning by doing. So you make mistakes on one production, you learn how to do it better on the next production, and that comes down to why I wrote the book, so that you don't have to make the mistakes in the first place. You can just flip over to the thing and go, oh yeah, I've got to get this ready. So my first coordinating job, for example, I built a 4-page checklist before I started based on all my experiences in production to date. By the end of that production, it had already bloomed to 11 pages. And that was the core of what became the first book, which was called Surviving Production. Now the book, like I said, is like 500 pages. It's not meant to be read in order. It's not meant to be read every chapter for every production. The idea is that it grows with you. There's chapters on legal clearances. You might not have them. Customs and immigration, you might not be moving people around, completion bond, all that sort of thing. But the audit happens at the end of all of them. And it's not really surprised that it's so far away and the production manager is no longer working on the project to recognize that everything that you prep is in order to get to that audit.
All right. And the audit means what? Tell us.
Oh, the audit is done by a independent accountant who looks at all the accounting documentation and validates that you spent the money where you said you spent the money. And the idea is that the money is spent in actual production costs, and you didn't just spend the production money and go out and buy yourself a car.
Right.
You actually made the movie with it.
So every expense has to have a line, a number, an account number, and be verified with a piece of paper for every expense that you have. Wow. That's
Absolutely. And that's why there's code numbers all the way through the budget, because that is actually preparing for the audit when you are budgeting.
right. Every code number for every item.
Yep.
So great. So budgeting is often intimidating for new filmmakers. So what are the biggest budgeting mistakes that you see with independent producers, and how can they avoid them?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I could talk for ages about budgets, but um, let me approach the intimidation factor and the budgeting mistakes by dispelling some myths. The first myth about budgeting, when you're about to start budgeting a project, is you will never have enough time and money to make your project. So just relax. You're never going to. Um, I've worked on micro budget films. I've worked on multi-million-dollar films where I'm still telling people, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have enough money to pay you more and all that stuff. The bigger the budget, it usually is the bigger the logistics. And so there is just more that has to be in the budget. So at least you can relax with that one. Now, the budget includes both time and money. So this is another thing to know. You're not alone. The first AD is key in managing the schedule, and the PM is key in managing the budget. So you're already working as a team. The director's going to have input. The producer's going to have input. I've got online resources on my website, debpatz.com. They're companion links for the book. And that will help you find rate sheets and stuff to help you with budgeting. So that's another nice thing to know. Another myth, you're not actually budgeting in that you're not saying how much is this going to cost. You're allocating funds that have already been raised. So it's a kind of reverse budgeting. You raise a certain amount of, the producer's going to raise a certain amount of money to make a movie. And you just have to allocate the funds to the various categories in the budget. So it's not like a blank check. You just have to sort of figure out where are you going to put that. But the trick, and this is where your experience will help, and that's why it's very hard to jump in as a production manager. You want to actually have some production experience getting there. Is that what are the production choices that have to be made to realize the budget at that budget level, to realize the director's vision? So those are the production decisions that the production manager has to make. So for example, are there going to be vista shots, which are expensive because you have to close off a lot of space, or are they going to be shooting it with close-ups in front of a hedge? Well, that's not a lot of space to, physical space to use up, so that'll actually be cheaper. So when you think about it, the production manager needs to know how to make a movie in order to do some of the budgeting. And when you're writing the budget, you're also making a list of assumptions. And so that's anything like how many days is going to be the shoot? Are you using unions or not? Is it a fall shoot, but the script is for winter, which means you need snowmaking? So any of those production decisions you make as you're doing the budget, you make a list of assumptions so that you can explain what's going on. And the final myth it's not the final one, but the third myth that I'm going to dispel is draft one of the budget will not be draft final. Just like the script goes through script revisions, the budget will go through budget revisions. So you don't have to be perfect the first time. But you did ask about mistakes, so I'm going to give you one mistake that's really worth thinking about. The biggest mistake I've seen is you're not leaving enough money for post. Make sure that the post is well budgeted. Make sure you save at least 40% of contingency because you're post. Because if you don't finish the film, there's no film to sell in the market afterward.
Wow, that's so important. You're right. I run into films that have gotten into post, started, run out of money, and are still sitting there waiting to be finished.
Yeah.
That's it's really bad when you've spent all that time on the film. Well, tell me what percentage of the budget normally goes to the producers? I heard you could budget 6 to 10%. Is that right?
Well, it depends. It depends on what the percentage is based on. It depends on who's financing your project. And it also depends on what is your definition of producer. So 6 to 10%, is it of the whole budget or is it the below the line costs? Because the budget is divided into above the line, which is the costs that were assembled during development of the script, which is like story write, script, writer, development costs, producer, director, star. And those costs can vary dramatically. On a big budget, they can be unusually high, and on a micro budget, they can be painfully low. So since that range is so huge, you usually don't bother including that in your calculation for what is the percentage of the producer fee. Below the line costs is usually divided into two sections: below the line production, which is principal photography, and below the line post. And so those are considered like the direct production costs. And typically you would do a percentage of those costs because they're a lot more predictable. There is another section at the bottom for like financing and insurance and legal. And again, depending how you're financing the project, those costs can range dramatically because they're not actually about hiring the cast, hiring the crew, and hiring the locations, which are direct costs. So often those also get left out of the calculation. And then some financiers will have restrictions on what the producer's fees are. So they might say that 20% of direct costs or 30% if it's a low budget documentary. And then finally, who is the producer? There are so many producer titles. You mentioned line producer. There's also supervising producers, executive producers, co-producers, and straight producers. In some cases, financiers require they all end up sharing the same producer fee. And in some cases, it's just the shareholders of the company that share that producer fee. So again, that's where it gets tied into financiers. So not really the answer you wanted, because I could have just said yes or no. I would say though, 6 to 10% of the overall budget, well, if you have to overgeneralize, it's not out of line for the first draft of the budget. But as you start assembling all the different parts, you probably have to revise the producer fee.
Okay, but you do have an idea somewhere in there to get
Yeah,
started. Just raise,
exactly.
really need that number to raise the funds. So you should probably lean on the higher side, higher percentage.
If you can, yep.
Well, from what you said, the production manager has to have a good amount of experience for you to turn your money and film over to them. They have to have made some films before, right?
Well, I mean, somebody's got to manage for the first time. So production managers can come up through a number of different ways on production. I came up through the production coordination route. I've seen people come up through production accounting, which of course they'll be very strong in the money side of things. I've also seen really good production managers come up through location management, because again, you're dealing with a lot of the logistics on set and locations and stuff. So it really varies. So you don't actually have to know everything when you're doing it, but that's where my book was designed to be open on the desk as you're working, so that if you need a mentor to say, oh my gosh, how do I deal with X? You can just flip to the chapter and go, okay, good. Somebody's given me some ideas. And really, and I've seen people do that. I mean, that's the reason I wrote it, so that I could do it. I would have it open, right? I gave myself a checklist at the beginning. And there is a checklist out there to count down through to production to go, I have 3 weeks before shooting. Have you done this? And so you don't have to know everything, but you're going to learn on every production.
Yes, you will learn on every production, and you need to know where to find the information you don't know. That's what you need.
That's true.
Okay. Well, how do you decide which producer gets what job? Because sometimes you see 6 or more producers on films, and you realize that each one must have a separate responsibility. So who makes that decision?
Yeah, there's so many producer titles. I guess in short, the producing team has to get together and decide amongst themselves. Just like a production manager can come up through several paths, producers come up through several paths. Some of them will come up through production management, some will come up through legal, some will come up through working on script and story, some of them through acting. So there's no one route to producing. And if there is more than one producer, they're usually working together because they have complementary skills. So they will decide amongst themselves what that is. Now, the line producer we already talked about is, you think, very often the very experienced production manager, very much working with the logistics of the production. Executive producer or associate producer, they can be credits that are given out as a courtesy. So those people may not even show up on set, or they can be paid positions and they're a very active part of the producing team. So it totally varies on every production. But the title that is just like straight producer, no leading qualifier, that is the main producer and the one who has to make the final decision, most responsible. And you can have more than one of those, but try to reduce it to one where possible.
And that you can only have 3 producers if they go up for Academy Award. That's all they.
That's right. Yeah, they reduced that at the Academy Awards because there was too many people taking the producer category. I mean, if too many, it starts to devalue the position if there's too many people sharing it and they're not actually doing the work.
And I noticed on Spielberg's new film, there's only he and one other person as the producer. There's only 2 names there. It's amazing.
That's great.
Yeah. So this is very important to know going in, because we all think that this film we're working on has a chance at an Academy Award. So
Yeah.
I think that solved first. The first question is, who's going on the stage with whom? That's
right.
Now we're getting into chapter 6, hiring the crew. And I was told by another producer that she would always call every referral. When she's looking to hire someone, she would call who they said for referral. And then if she found 2 people who were similar with experience and feedback, she would pick the one that was easier to get along with on the set. Is that common?
Honestly, I don't know if I've ever found 2 people who are that similar, but theoretically, if I did, I mean, yes, definitely call references, definitely call contacts on previous productions. So they may not be references as listed on a CV, but if I see a previous project, I could definitely call a previous production and also find out more about this person. Because think about it, film productions, they have to come together really quickly. The team has to work together very intensely, and it's for a very short time. If someone happens to be problematic on that team, you might choose to keep them to the end of production because there's no time to replace them. And that's one of the reasons you really need to call references. On the other hand, there is also personality clashes that can happen. And so the reference may not be valid because you might be able to get along with them. So you have to be mindful when you're actually doing that. Yeah,
Yeah, because you've got to have that crew communicating with each other and
yeah.
happy to work there together.
It Yeah, because it's all about creating a team, right? You have to have a team that works really well together. And so, the production manager and the producer will be hiring keys, who will in turn typically be hiring their teams. So it is about building a team that's going to work together. And so theoretically, if you're in that choice where there's two of the same people, you have to know they're going to work. If you get a sense that they're going to work together as a team, that will be great.
Right. So usually when you hire a director of photography, he brings his crew.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's okay.
Although I will tell a story about a project I did where it was a short that I managed to do an almost entirely upgrading crew. I wanted to work on this film. I read the script from this writer director, and it was rather experimental, but I could see how it all took place in a house set. And I was working at the time on a project that had a beautiful house set. And so I was the coordinator on that show and I was managing the short. So I asked if I could use the set. And they said, well, you'll have to find one of the key crew to work on it. Well, I knew the gaffer wanted to become a DP. So I offered the gaffer a position as a DP. Well, that set so many things into position, because then when he fit into that position, his electric and grip team that were working with him for the last 2 years all upgraded once on the project and joined him because they wanted to support him as a new DP. And then I also got, the equipment warehouse was very happy to help support him as well. And the camera team, they all upgraded one. So the clapper loader became the focus puller, the trainee became the clapper loader. And then the sound team, which of course there was only two of them, he says, okay, you can't hire everybody and not us. I know we're not upgrading, but we're going to join you too.
Oh,
So I was able to put this short together with a crew that had basically been working together for 2 years on this set.
oh,
So it was completely beautiful, but that doesn't happen all the time. But it is that whole thing about how people will work together in teams, and they will also upgrade together in teams, because once you start working with people and you get that sort of second language going on set, you want to keep it going on other productions.
yes, that's brilliant. Well done. Now, you've worked on productions of
Mhm.
many sizes. So, what production management principles remain the same whether you're making a small documentary or a major studio project?
Okay. I'm going to give you two principles. The first one is every cast and crew member is valuable. Sounds obvious, but on the bigger crews, it's very hard for each person to see their contribution to the whole. And so it really helps if you can help them see it. Because it's not just about the numbers, it's about the people who are making the film. And so that is a really important concept that you have to get across. Because, if there's only 10 people on the project, everybody's doing so much. But if there's 150 people doing the same amount of work, as it were, everybody's doing a very small slice of that big production. The second principle I was going to, I would say, is the production manager needs to know how to say no, which is often what they're known for, but they also have to know when to say yes. And that comes to spending the production budget. So the production manager needs to know, where is the story in the script? And I mean the director's vision of the story. So just as an example. It's an exterior of a building, the character's walking into the building, it's a separate location, it's a unit move. Is that scene completely necessary, or can you tell that story the same way by the character arriving into the room, taking off their coat? And now you have not done a location move, so you've actually saved a lot of production time.
And
I mean, you can't answer that because part of it is the director's vision.
Okay.
But I will give you another example, and this was when I was doing IMAX, IMAX 3D. IMAX, it was a space city. Outside the space city is 3D animation, and the set was a set, and we needed to connect the two of them. So we created a shot that was supposedly constant, started full frame animation, went down into the space city where you would see the animated background with real people plugged into it so that they look like they were walking. And then the camera keeps going down into one of the buildings, and you're in the set. So you think you're in the building. And we've now connected the animation to the set, and you feel like you're in space, not like you're on a studio set. But there was 8 seconds where we had an animated background where we had to put actual people in. We ended up renting the Sky Dome in Toronto, putting people walking around on the green screen of the outfield and plugging them in. It was a really expensive shot, but it was the cell shot and totally required for the story of that movie. So we knew we had to make that. So that's when you need to know when to say yes.
Absolutely. But I think this is really important to bring to the attention. When you see a shot that could be condensed into from 2 shots to 1,
Yes.
so you save money and time, but who takes this information to whom?
Well, that's where you're having meetings with producer and director, and that's where the PM often gets noticed as the no person, because they're challenging ideas of, do we need this? Can we combine that?
Right.
And that's where you get that sense of, oh, they always say no, but
Right.
also needs to know when to say yes.
Exactly. Okay. So your book goes into a discussion on script breakdowns and scheduling, which is so important. And tell us, how much money and stress can a well-prepared schedule save during production?
Basically, you're talking about pre-production work, and that is so essential today more than ever. When we did green screen, you would have a green screen on the set, and CGI, computer imagery, would be created for that background while you were shooting, and during post, it would get inserted. But today, we now do things like virtual production, which was made famous on The Mandalorian. And what happens is that CGI background imagery is added onto a volume stage, which is like a huge wraparound TV screen background. And that imagery is there on the shoot day. Well, that tells you that you're not building that while you're shooting. You're building that in prep in order to get to the shoot day. So that's putting a lot more pressure on prep work in order to get to the shoot day, instead of saying, oh yeah, we'll add that later in post. So the ADs are using the breakdowns to know what actually has to show up on that shoot day. If the character reaches for a glass, that glass better be there, and props will make sure it's there. You end up reusing those script breakdowns, at least the coordinator will end up reusing it into the shooting schedules, and then reuse it again onto the call sheet. When it gets to the call sheet, it's not really news for anybody, because you've had so many meetings about it and everybody has been working to get there. But you end up keep reusing it, which is very useful. But that concept of prep is really important, in that there was a sign that this art department put up once, which I just loved, and it was called they would put it up on the entrance to the art department. And that was fast, good, cheap, pick two, because you won't get all three. And prep is about doing everything cheap and good, because you have time in prep. You haven't actually started shooting. As soon as you start shooting, there's no time left. You've got an X number of days in order to capture the imagery. So shoot will be fast. And so if you can only pick one of the other two, it's either going to be good or it's going to be cheap. Well, you're not going to choose, I don't want it to be good. So when you're shooting, it will be fast and it will be expensive in order to make it happen. So the only where you can save money is in prep when you actually have time.
Wow, that's really good advice. Good. Well, all right, now let's talk about cost reports and cash flow management, because you go into detail about these. So really, the question is, why are these financial tools so critical? And what can happen when filmmakers ignore them?
Well, the production manager is required to monitor the spending of the production money, and that's basically cost reporting. At the end of every shoot day, for example, or at the end of a shoot day, there might be a question that comes up, and that is, we're really close to finishing. We might need an hour of overtime. Should we do the hour of overtime, or should we come back to this location tomorrow? And the producer would make that decision, because the producer's the last one to make that decision, is the most responsible. The director and the first AD will have a point of view based on what's there, and the production manager will be able to contribute the cost estimate of the two choices, so that the producer makes an informed decision, gets the input from the director, the first AD, and the production manager, and decides, you know what, nope, we're going to wrap now, come back tomorrow, or we're going to shoot that extra hour in order to get the day and move on to another location.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's on a daily basis. You're doing that kind of verbally. On a weekly basis, you're actually doing the cost report. And that's partly because the financiers need to know that you're spending the money appropriately. And that way you can also find out, how are you doing on spending the contingency? Are you saving enough for post? All that kind of stuff. Cash flow is a totally different concept. Cash flow is a document, well, the cash flow document is a chart of when the various costs in the budget will happen over the course of production and post, like what week it will happen and what months. It compares those outflows then with the monetary inflows from the financiers, which are known as drawdowns. The financiers, you see, they don't give you the money all up front. They might be giving you the money, enough money to make the movie for your whole budget, but they're going to release their money on milestones, like a percentage on first day of principal photography, maybe a percentage on last day of the shoot, a percentage on rough cut, delivery, final costs. So you're spending most of your money, though, during principal photography. But if you're not receiving some of that money until it's like completed and at final costs, there's going to be a moment in production where your bank balance is going to go negative. And that's called negative cash flow. It usually happens around mid-shoot, end of the shoot, sometimes as late as early post. Depends on your financiers and what drawdowns you've negotiated. So what you end up having to do then is borrow money from a bank or an interim lender in order to positively cash flow the production. So what you basically do is you sell those last drawdowns at final cost to the bank. They loan you the money up front, they charge you interest, and then they collect those final costs at the end, those final cost drawdowns. So the cash flow document is critical so that as you get through production, even though you have enough money on paper, you won't run out of money in the bank account.
Wow, that's very important, right? Okay, let's go to location management, which I understand is most important. What are some of the most common mistakes filmmakers make when choosing and managing locations?
Oh, I should start giving you some shorter answers. Um, Location management mistakes. Probably the biggest one, listen to the location, because replacing the sound in post can be very expensive. And so, yeah, it's so funny how often you go on surveys and scouts where they're actually physically looking at the location, but not actually listening to what's going to happen. Survey the location with the key crew so that they can prep for it. That's where it minimizes your surprises, and your sound department will tell you what the noises are. Another part of it is time of day of the shoot. Does it match the time of day when you're surveying? So, for example, you can go and survey a place and go, oh, yeah, this is perfect. And then you show up later and the tide is out. So it's like, okay, if you've got a tide to deal with or you've got traffic to deal with, that happens at different times of day. So you want to think about not only just the location, but when are you using that location? And then unit logistics, parking, lunch location. It's not just about filming the set. What are all the logistics that you need around the set? What are all the other people in the neighborhood or companies in the neighborhood that are going to be affected by what you're doing? And that's why experienced location managers do really well as production managers, because they are thinking beyond just the set to all the things that support the set around it.
Wow, that's important. I hadn't thought of those things. Now, production insurance and completion bonds aren't topics that filmmakers get excited about. So why are they so important?
Oh God, I remember when I was writing the book and I called up an insurance company that I've dealt with a lot. And I said, I'd like you to look at this and see if I've left anything out. He was so excited. He goes, oh my God, somebody's writing about insurance. He likes his job. But anyway, the completion bond is basically malpractice insurance for filmmakers. Investors are buying a movie that doesn't exist yet. It's very high risk financing, and the bond will ensure the film's going to be completed. There will be a film to sell at the end, and therefore they will have potential to make their money back from their investment and earn a profit when they release it. Now, not all investors require a bond, but some of them do. Like a Hollywood studio film, they don't actually use a bond. If there's a problem, they just raise the budget, which actually is a lot simpler than it sounds. They need a reasonable expectation that they're going, when they sell the film at the higher budget, they'll actually make the money back. So they do a lot of due diligence around that. But I included a story in my book, which I think explains the bond pretty well. And I was working on a project that was going over budget. I was not the PM, so I got to say that, by the way. And the bond rep showed up on set every day on a regular basis, made everybody totally nervous, because a bond, what they do is if they take over the production, they think it's going out of control, they can fire whoever they want and finish the movie, because that's what their insurance is there for, is that they will finish the movie. But the crew learned quite quickly that they're not going to fire the third grip or something like that. They're going to fire the director, the producer, the DOP, the first AD, or the PM, or any of them. So they're only looking at the keys. So those are the guys that get really nervous. But from visiting every day and just hanging out on the set, that gave enough pressure to those keys to become more decisive and get their days. We did end up shooting one extra day on the shoot, but, which is costly, but we finished the film and they didn't have to take over the project.
Wow, that was close.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go into technology and how it has transformed filmmaking over the last 20 years. Which technological changes have had the biggest impact on production management, and what skills should emerging filmmakers focus on?
This is such a good question because I've certainly been around enough to see a lot of technological changes. And technology is always changing. But honestly, they're just tools. From a PM's perspective, prototype tools and equipment, they're costly. But if it's important for the production, then it happens. We worked on a project with IMAX, which is the 3D IMAX movie. There was only 2 cameras because it was prototype, and one of them was always being repaired, and the other one was on set. And so when that one showed up, the other one broke down, and that one went to be repaired. There was a time when they were both being repaired, and we just had to work overtime in order to make sure that they could show up, be ready in order to be on set. So it can be costly, but it was really important for that film. But looking forward, if you're going to stay in film for years, you have to know that whatever technological tools that you learn today, they're going to evolve and be replaced in years to come. When I started working in film, it was before computers, before Google, before iPads. iPads didn't even exist. We're now wrestling with how to work with AI responsibly as a tool, not to replace creativity in people. At film school, I learned how to cut film on film stock, and now it's digital. I mean, the mechanics are the same, but the tools are different. I now hire a PM who knows how to use those current tools. But what is lasting is how to cut the scenes together to create the story and the emotion. And whether I was doing that with film or it's done digitally now, that's the same. So, and then, but from a PM perspective, what would be the biggest thing that you would learn? The biggest effect is probably smartphones, because now the communication travels a little differently with everybody carrying a smartphone. But that's been around now for some time. So I don't know what else is going to be new in the future. We'll see.
Right. It's exciting right now. So many new things are happening.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if a filmmaker listening today could implement just one lesson from your book, what would you want that lesson to be and why?
Oh, that's so hard. It's 500 pages. The production manager is about making decisions. And honestly, as soon as you write your first budget, you're going to ask that question going, oh, but I don't even know what to do here. Well, you get to make a decision about it. And part of that making decisions is knowing when to say no and when to say yes. So it comes back to understanding the story, because as a production manager, you're using your expertise in management to realize the story on screen.
Exactly. It's all about the story, right? When you come to the bottom line, it's all about story. Because when people ask me about the film grant, what's the most important thing? And I say story, story, and more story. That's what we care about. So
Yeah.
good job. Thank you so much, Deborah, for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your book, Film Production Management 101. It's clearly an invaluable resource for filmmakers who want to master both creative and business sides of production. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on the Art of Film Funding podcast. If you're developing a film, a documentary, or a television project, and you need support, be sure to visit From the Heart Productions at fromtheheartproductions.com. For more than 3 decades, we have helped independent filmmakers move their projects forward through sponsorship and grant opportunities. We have a lot of educational resources and personal mentoring on our website. And sponsorship can make your project eligible to receive tax-deductible donations while our grant program helps filmmakers tell stories that might not otherwise be funded. So visit From the Heart for free classes on film funding and learn about our grants. And until next week, keep telling your stories and keep following your heart.
Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Raiklin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidraiklin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.